The gates of Buckingham Palace loomed high and majestic, framed by ironwork and gleaming in the early morning light. Samuel Mitchell, a royal guard, stood tall and immovable before them. His uniform was pristine, a deep red jacket adorned with gleaming gold buttons, and his tall hat perched perfectly atop his head. The sun caught the metal of his buttons, making him shine like a beacon, yet his stillness made him appear more like a statue than a living, breathing man. Around him, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Tourists gathered, their cameras snapping relentlessly as they marveled at the sight of one of Britain's iconic symbols of tradition. Some smiled, pointing and chatting amongst themselves, while others whispered about the man in uniform, offering bits of humor or commentary. But despite the attention, Samuel did not move a muscle. His face was stern and focused, his eyes straight ahead. He had been trained for this, to stand his ground, unwavering, no matter what. But not everyone in the crowd was there to admire the royal guard's discipline. At the edge of the throng, a group of men stood huddled together. Their eyes weren't filled with curiosity or respect. They watched Samuel with the sharp, calculating eyes of predators circling their prey. Their leader, Jason Hart, wore a black leather jacket, expensive sunglasses, and a posture of arrogance that made people uneasy. "Look at this guy," Jason said loud enough for those around him to hear. His finger pointed at Samuel as he mocked him. "Thinks he's tough just standing there. I bet he won't even blink if I slap him." The rest of the group laughed loudly. "Be scared under that hat," one of them joked, while another added, "Maybe he's sleeping." The crowd around them shifted uncomfortably. Sensing the growing tension, some murmured that they should call security, while others, more intrigued, started filming on their phones, eager to capture the drama unfolding. The murmurs, the sneers, and the laughter intensified, and Samuel could feel the eyes on him, yet he did not flinch. Jason turned to one of his friends, Ryan, who already had his phone out, live streaming the scene. "All right, people," he said into the camera. "We're at Buckingham Palace, and we're about to see if this royal guard is really as tough as they say." The group cheered, egging Jason on. Comments flooded in, many mocking Samuel and daring Jason to push him further. "Bet he won't move," one comment read. "Push him," another shouted. "Guards are just for show." Samuel didn't budge. His gaze remained fixed ahead. His stance was perfect, and his training kept his emotions in check. But inside, his instincts were on high alert. This wasn't just some random prank or harmless mocking. Something was off, and Samuel could feel it. Jason and his crew weren't acting like mere troublemakers. Their glances, especially the way they kept darting toward the side gate near the palace loading area, were too calculated. It was then that Samuel's instincts screamed that there was something bigger at play here. Jason, seeing that Samuel wasn't reacting, took a few steps closer, closing the distance between them until he was standing right in front of the royal guard. He didn't care that they were surrounded by tourists and cameras. With his confidence swelling, Jason sneered, "What's the matter, soldier? Cat got your tongue?" He waved his hand in front of Samuel's eyes. "Say something, or are you just a doll in a costume?" The crowd, eager for some entertainment, laughed and egged Jason on. Still, Samuel did not move. He remained perfectly still, his eyes locked ahead, his jaw tight. Jason's grin widened. "Maybe he needs a little push," he said, moving his hand toward Samuel's shoulder. He shoved Samuel lightly, not enough to cause harm, but enough to get a reaction. The crowd gasped as Samuel's body tensed, but he did not budge. His hands clenched slightly, and he felt the faint stir of his heartbeat quicken. The act was meant to provoke him, but he was trained not to respond unless it escalated into a serious threat. "Whoa," Ryan shouted, zooming in with his phone. "Did you see that? He's still frozen. What a joke. Try harder," one of the other thugs shouted. Sensing that the tension was building, Jason's grin grew wider as he grabbed hold of Samuel's tall hat. Without any further hesitation, he yanked it off, holding it aloft like a trophy. The crowd reacted again, some jeering and others calling for him to stop. But Jason laughed, taunting Samuel. "Looks like I win," Jason shouted, raising the hat higher for the crowd to see. "What are you going to do about it, soldier boy?" Samuel's jaw clenched, but he stayed perfectly still, resisting the urge to respond. His training kept him composed. But this was no longer a simple prank. It was escalating quickly. As Jason held the hat in front of Samuel's face, Samuel's eyes darted to the side gate once more. A man in a worker's uniform was moving in an unusually hurried manner, carrying a large box toward a delivery truck near the loading dock. Samuel's pulse quickened, and his instincts kicked in. This wasn't just bullying, it was a distraction. Jason continued to taunt him, but Samuel's attention was no longer on him. His mind raced as he calculated the new development. Something was wrong. Before he could act, an elderly man with a cane stepped forward from the crowd, cutting through the noise with a calm, yet firm, voice. "Put the hat down." The crowd turned to look at the man, and Jason, sensing the disruption to his fun, sneered. "Your granddad?" Jason mocked. "What are you going to do? Hit me with your stick?" The old man did not flinch. Instead, he lifted his cane and tapped it twice on the cobblestone. Tap tap. Samuel's heart skipped a beat. The sound wasn't random, it was a military signal. A warning. Samuel's instincts flared. The old man wasn't just some tourist. He was ex-military, and the tap of his cane was a deliberate signal. The crowd shifted nervously, sensing the change in the air. Some people pulled out their phones again, but others stood still, watching the elderly man, sensing that something important was unfolding. Samuel's focus snapped back to the situation at hand. This wasn't just a prank or a gang trying to prove a point. It was something much more dangerous. Jason, however, was oblivious to the change. His gaze stayed locked on Samuel as he raised the hat again, ready to throw it to the ground. But before he could act, Samuel moved with lightning speed. In one fluid motion, his hand shot out, snatching the hat back from Jason's grasp, and stepping forward so quickly that Jason stumbled backward, almost dropping his phone. The crowd fell silent. "Good choice," the old man whispered from beside Samuel. Jason stood frozen, his confidence visibly shaken. His earlier smirk had faded, replaced with a look of fear. The other thugs, sensing the shift in power, began to back away slowly. Samuel stood still, his eyes now focused entirely on the side gate where the man with the box had disappeared. The pieces were coming together. This wasn't just a distraction, it was part of a much larger operation. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some whispering excitedly about what had just transpired. But Samuel didn't relax. His mind was still racing, analyzing every detail of the encounter. He knew that Jason and his gang were more than just troublemakers looking for a laugh. They were part of something much bigger. As the crowd thinned, the old man with the cane reappeared, stepping quietly to Samuel's side. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the area, but his voice remained steady. "You see it too, don't you?" he asked, pretending to examine the palace gates. Samuel didn't respond aloud, but he gave the faintest nod. The old man continued, his voice low but clear. "The loading dock," he said. "It's a drop-off. They're smuggling something out of the palace." Samuel remained motionless, but his mind was spinning. The pieces were falling into place. What had started as a minor disturbance was quickly becoming a threat. The criminals, hiding behind the distraction, were using the chaos to smuggle something out of the palace. But what was it? "Who are you?" Samuel asked finally, his voice soft but urgent. The old man paused for a moment before answering with a wry smile. "Just an old soldier who knows the smell of trouble." The situation was quickly escalating. Samuel kept a close eye on the side gate, where more workers in uniforms were now entering. One was pushing a large crate on a trolley, the edges of the crate peeking out, showing something wrapped in fabric. Samuel's mind raced. The crate wasn't part of any routine deliveries, it was too timed, too coordinated. It was part of the heist. Samuel knew he couldn't wait any longer. The situation was unfolding too quickly, and he needed to act now. He subtly activated his earpiece, connecting to the palace security team. His voice was steady as he spoke into the mic. "This is Sentinel-1. We have a breach near the loading dock. Request immediate surveillance." The response came almost immediately. "Copy that. 2 suspects in worker uniforms. Possible accomplices still in the courtyard." Samuel kept his focus, his sharp instincts on high alert. The old man, once again standing at his side, turned toward him, his expression knowing. "You see it too," the old man said quietly. Samuel nodded. This was more than just a petty crime. This was an orchestrated heist involving the highest levels of criminal activity. As the hours passed, the situation only grew more intense. The workers and the thieves were becoming bolder, and the signs of something bigger started to become more apparent. Samuel knew he wasn't just facing a band of petty criminals. This operation was organized and carefully planned. The old man with the cane wasn't just an observer, he had seen the signs too. And he knew exactly how to respond. Together, they pieced together the pieces of the puzzle. This wasn't just a smuggling operation, it was part of a larger network. With links inside the palace, Samuel's suspicions were confirmed when he found the symbols etched into the crates, symbols that led him straight to Victor Kane, the mastermind behind the entire operation. Kane wasn't just interested in the royal artifacts. He was sending a message, a challenge to the monarchy, to the royal guards, and to the palace itself. And Samuel was ready to respond. As Samuel stood on guard once more, his mind wasn't just focused on the tasks at hand. He knew this fight wasn't over. Kane's network was still out there, and the real battle was just beginning. But for now, Buckingham Palace had been secured. The stolen artifacts returned, and the criminals apprehended. The royal guard had not just stood still. He had protected the palace and the future. The game was far from finished, but Samuel would be ready.